Okay, everybody, welcome to News Without Borders, another session here. Today we're going to talk about climate change. We're going to tackle the problem of climate change and solve everything. More specifically, we'll talk about Donald Trump, everyone's favourite president.
Elect.
And we're going to president-elect, and we're going to talk about Trump's views on climate change, Trump and his motley crew. So, signs that Trump is perhaps not going to be the most environmentally friendly president in the world are, for example, him threatening to walk out of the Paris Agreement between world leaders last year. Also, he's been threatening, I'll use the word threatening, others may say supporting the expansion of fracking and the natural gas sector in the United States, which is already quite burgeoning. And also cutting investment on renewables. He's also threatened to rescind Obama's EPA, Environmental Protection Act. So the signs don't look good for Obama. Any other dangerous signs?
Well, I think there's been a lot of talk about how Trump is going to be moderated by the people around him and by Congress. But you know, let's start with his team. Maybe they're not expected to be the most moderating force, but they're certainly not one we can expect to do any moderating when it comes to climate change, right? So we've got Pence as the VP, who's expressed very strong climate skeptic views in the past, and then the person in charge of the Environmental Protection Agency is this Myron, who's also been very vocally climate skeptic. I'm not sure if they've all reached the heady heights of Trump in saying that it's a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese for some reason.
That famous tweet.
But yeah, of course, Republicans have a very strong lack of belief in human-caused climate change as well. So, as Sean mentioned to me earlier on, scarily, of all the mad things that Trump has suggested, perhaps the most real and terrifying of all of them, his policies on climate, and might be the most likely to actually come to be.
Also because they're not likely to face a lot of opposition from Democrats in the House as well, right? Like that's the point, is that both Republicans and Democrats are not particularly too
environmentally motivated.
Yeah, let's say, yeah.
Well, we've seen with the North Dakota thing recently. I mean, a lot of people have been coming out. We've been seeing a lot of support, but do you think the Democrats have really been as vocal as they could have been in supporting these people? Anyway, that's probably a subject for another day. Yeah. So, Trump recently said that he wants to cut funding for climate-related science in NASA, right? And I think he used really interesting terminology. He said he's going to get rid of politicized science. Now, this is a really interesting phrase, right? Because there's been about 7 different studies into climate consensus, and they've ranged between 91% and 97% in terms of consensus amongst the scientists and the scientific community on this. So there is this big political divide in the science. It's only in the actual populace it gets down to about 50-50, right? And it's people like Trump who've politicized it. So he's politicized it, and then he said, we need to get rid of this politicized science. But I think there's the research shows that they understand climate change just as much as Democrats, but it's something in their identity they don't want to believe it. And one thing that's come out recently, a great paper by this guy called Campbell. I'm hoping it's a guy.
Yeah.
I think it's a guy. I'm not sure.
He just has one name as well.
An academic called Campbell that shows that actually, if you prime free market solutions to climate change, you see this huge spike in believing in human-caused climate change, which I think is really interesting, right? So they're not necessarily against believing in climate change, but they're so terrified of all these regulatory policies that are generally suggested when it comes to climate change that they decide they don't want to believe in it. Isn't that, I mean, that's I think something that we need to be aware of when we're trying to persuade these Republicans and Trump to find solutions to this.
Yeah. Well, this all begs the question, why should we care? I mean, it's just a guy who doesn't really believe too much that we're causing destruction to the environment.
So what implications does a climate skeptic controlled America have for the world?
I think the first interesting thing to talk about is if you go back to the Paris Climate Agreement last year, and you look at all of these countries that made a commitment to reduce their carbon footprint. And you have to look at the influence, the sway that America has in influencing decisions. Would China have made the agreement that they did had America not done that? Because
Right.
they have a lot of clout, right, in the international community. They have a huge amount of say. And Obama was quite, you say what you want about the Democrats, but Obama passed a lot of legislation which was environmentally friendly. There's a whole lot of discussion you can have about how effective it was and how much he stuck to it and all that kind of stuff. But if you go into such an agreement with rhetoric saying we need to be better to our wonderful planet, and you're back home, you're just...
He said that? Obama's all right. It's okay.
Everything's changed. I love the guy. And you go back home and you frack the shit out of the ground, and you have no interest in cutting down carbon emissions. Then of course no one's going to take you seriously. Your bark is essentially worse than your bite.
I think you're absolutely right. If America starts to not take its commitments seriously, then it's sending a signal to the entire world, especially when you consider how much emissions they're responsible for.
Yeah.
Just don't worry about it.
And this is a sensitive time as well, because OPEC at the moment, so these countries, these group of countries, oil-rich or oil-producing countries in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, that's the only one that comes to my mind now. Nothing else is coming to my brain at all. Iran, Iraq. So these countries that are really producing a lot of oil, they're in discussions at the moment and trying to agree or come to some kind of consensus, like let's cut down on the amount we're producing, because that's what's bringing the oil prices down. That's one of the many reasons, but one of the major reasons why the oil prices are coming down, because Saudi Arabia are just flooding the market with so much oil. They're overproducing in an effort to drive competition out of the market. And so now OPEC, they're coming together and saying, right, we're all suffering because of this. Let's come together and try and find a way to bring it down. But with Trump saying this, with America saying that, okay, we're going to compete even more than you, what's the likelihood that OPEC are actually going to say, do you know what, yeah, we're not going to compete with each other, but oh God, there's America there on the other side as well. It's going to have a lot of influence on the outcomes of their talks as well.
Although, we should note that when those oil prices come up, if and when they do come up, we talk about fracking the shit. Well, actually, there hasn't been so much fracking going on because it's expensive, right? And you only want to do things like the tar sands in Canada or fracking when it's worth it for the price of the oil. So if we see that price come up, then we're also going to see an increase in this kind of carbon heavy exploration. So I think we can both agree that it's terrifying, and this is the main thing to be scared of. I mean, obviously none of us want to see a discriminatory country and so forth, but at least if America had a spike in discrimination, that's something that can be combated later on. Right. If we fuck up the environment, then no second chances.
Exactly.
So I think this is a really scary time. Perhaps we could end on a more optimistic note.
Yeah, so there's certain countries in the world that do need
who we can emulate.
Yeah, who we can look up to.
Maybe we can send like Trump a letter and say to him, here are some people you want to look at.
Yeah.
You can tweet him.
But that's kind of the equivalent of sending a picture of a little kid who's picked up some litter on the floor. Like, look, you should do that. No, I don't know.
Who is this? Costa Rica? Costa Rica. Oh, right.
So Costa Rica,
give me statistics.
99% of their energy in 2015 came from renewables. 99%. So all but 1% of the energy produced in their country was from renewable energy, which is incredible, I think. Incredible progress.
Very high on the social progress index as well. Yeah. We should all be eyes to Costa Rica.
Check out our last video.
Learn a lot from them.
Who else?
Scotland, 97% of household electricity provided by wind, and we know that Sweden has just announced that it aims to be full renewables by 2040. So here are some leaders that hopefully Trump can be looking to for some inspiration when he actually gets to the bit where he's like, what policies can I actually do?
The fundamental point of this video, I think, is just to make sure, is to encourage people to follow this, like really carefully. This is we are, as Chomsky likes to say, approaching the precipice, after which there is no return. Like, we're getting to a point where we can't go back from that. Like, we're on an irreversible path towards absolute destruction.
And do you know what? Yeah, I mean, you're saying this, and we're talking about it. We're talking right now about how important this is, and at the same time, I'm being flippant. And to be honest, I'm not taking it as seriously as I should be, and it's really easy to do that. I think. So you're bang on right. We do need to watch it very carefully, and any opportunity we have to take some kind of political action to make sure that we do that. Right?
All right.
Okay.
So if this is the first time you're seeing our faces, like, subscribe, share, etc. if you found it interesting or useful in any way at all. And that's it. That's us for another day. See you next time.